Your brain isn't necessarily showing you what's true. Your brain is filtering everything that you're seeing and feeling. And sometimes what gets filtered out is the very thing keeping you sick. When you think about it, it's really amazing how the brain works. The brain is really good at filtering out what we deem is important. For instance, if you're in a party, you can pick out your name in even when there's so many noises around you, you can hear your name. That's called the cocktail party effect. Right after you put on your clothes, you usually don't notice them after a few seconds. Right after you enter a house that has a really strong smell, sometimes within seconds or minutes, you don't notice it anymore because once again, your brain is filtering out that information because it's no longer very important. If your body is in crisis mode, sometimes you don't feel the pain that you experience, even though your body has experienced a very serious injury. A few years ago, my parents bought a CRV, and I never used to notice CRVs on the road before. But after my parents bought the CRV, I noticed that there are actually a ton of CRVs on the road. I didn't really care about CRVs before, but because my brain was now more aware of them, my brain didn't filter out all the CRVs on the road for me. Our bodies and our minds are constantly bombarded by stimuli, whether it be things we hear, things we see, things we smell, things we touch, etc., right? Our brain allows us to see what we deem as important. This can actually become a problem if our brains are wired by trauma. Reality shows are not necessarily real, but if you watch them, I don't recommend it. I don't know if it's still around. I used to watch America's Next Top Model. It's a fashion reality show where a bunch of women would be thrown into a house together. And some women, no matter what you said to them, they took offense to it. Some people have been traumatized so much that they see everyone as an enemy. They see everyone as attacking them. Or on a smaller scale, people can live in denial about their lives or their situations. We can be around loved ones and everyone can see a flaw about the person, but the person cannot see it. They're just in denial or they're just so unaware of how they are showing up in the world. If we have trained our brains to see the world in a certain way, we will continue to see the world in that same way until we essentially reprogram or we rewire our brain to see something else. Unfortunately, we may be allowing our brain to basically limit ourselves on what we can experience. This also explains why, for instance, some nurses will work the whole day without stopping to eat, and their body is just so used to it. They basically train their brains to think that it's normal and healthy. And then, of course, after doing this over and over and over again, that's when their bodies get sick, right? Here's when starts to become an even bigger problem, in my opinion. Just like everyone else in the world, the medical world is programmed, the people in the medical world are programmed to only see what they've been taught. For instance, if you're a nurse or a doctor or someone in the medical field listening to this, what do you think of when you hear the word diabetes? Or what do you think of when you hear the word hyperlipidemia or the word stroke? I'll bet a few treatments and a few protocols come to mind. I bet you have a picture of patients that you've had with these diseases, right? Just like everyone else in the world, the people in the medical field has been programmed to handle things in a certain way. The problem is that this programming is often incomplete, ineffective, completely wrong, or just completely dangerous. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. That's why we must go to God first when it comes to our health in every part of our lives. 2 Corinthians 10:5 says this, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. As this verse says, we are to be examining every thought that comes to our mind and testing it. We're supposed to hold it up and see if it aligns with what the Bible says. It's so important that we think outside the box, that we reprogram our minds, that we get rid of faulty programming. So when a doctor or a nurse practitioner or whoever says, this is the only treatment for what you're going through, or if he or she says, there is no treatment for what you're going through, instead of just taking what he or she says at face value, ask yourself, ask God, what do you say about this situation? Remember, just like everyone else, it's likely that the person giving you that diagnosis or the person giving you the advice or that treatment, he or she is going off of his or her own programming, his or her own education. But remember, the education, the science, whatever programming that person is going by, it's often incomplete or ineffective or completely wrong or maybe even dangerous. I'm not saying that this applies to every situation, and I'm not saying that we should live in fear. But once again, let's take this out of the healthcare system for a minute. On the TV, in social media, in culture, in music, how often is the world wrong about pretty much everything? We can't trust the viewpoints of a TV show or a movie that we just saw. I don't recommend necessarily trusting the news. Our friends have their own programming, our family members have their own programming, we have our own programming. So at the end of the day, that's why it's so important to go to God first for everything, for our health and our whole life. Remember, this is how your brain works. It filters out things that you deem as unimportant. It shows you what you think is important. It's almost scary in a way to think about how much we're missing out on because we're just so unaware of every thought that has bombarded our minds since we were younger. I mean, think about people that grew up in poverty. If they haven't seen anything else in their life besides poverty, how do you think that's shaped their view of the world? If you look at the different classes, poor, middle class, rich, how do you think each of those classes views the world? Different cultures, different ethnicities. We've all grown up with extremely different experiences. Every culture has good things and bad things, right? We can grow up our whole lives thinking something is totally normal, totally neutral. But what if what we're seeing is ultimately harming us? For instance, I was listening to this podcast and there was this really successful Mexican guy on the podcast who was talking about how Mexicans view themselves in the US and how people in the US view them and how those views have been detrimental to the community. The more I talk about this, I just see this as something that can be a huge problem. But the good news is that we just need to be aware of it. All we have to do is what the Bible says, be transformed by the renewal of our minds, take every thought captive, realize that those thoughts that have been with us since childhood, those beliefs that have been with us since childhood, they might be wrong and they might not be serving us. And when it comes to our health, we just need to remember that we serve the maker of heaven and earth. So there's always hope, right? In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, it says in verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I wanted to highlight the word hope for you today. Hope in that verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Whatever you're going through, whether you're exhausted, you have chronic symptoms, autoimmunity, whatever it is, there is always hope. Before I go, I just wanted to remind you that I do offer one-on-one sessions. If you have been struggling with exhaustion, chronic symptoms, autoimmunity, and you are confused or overwhelmed, go to herholistichealing.com/services. I would love to meet with you so that we can talk about a couple steps just for you so that you can move forward with your health today. I will talk to you soon. Thanks for listening today. If you like what you heard, would you take a minute to leave the show a review? I would love to connect with you at herholistichealing.substack.com. This content is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be medical advice.